My parents humiliated me at their anniversary gala, publicly declaring my brother their only successful child, while I stood right beside him. I left silently, heartbroken but resolved. When he later begged for work, I hired him as a janitor, a secret I saved for their next boastful toast. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The room was spinning, or perhaps it was just the sudden rush of blood leaving my head. I remember gripping the stem of my champagne flute so hard I thought the crystal might actually snap in my hand, sending shards of glass into my palm. That physical pain would have been preferable to the hollow ache spreading through my chest. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. The venue was exquisite, a ballroom I had quietly paid the deposit for, though nobody knew that. The chandeliers were dripping with faux diamonds, casting a shimmering, fractured light over the faces of our extended family, friends, and neighbors. I stood near the head table, wearing a dress that likely cost more than my father's entire wardrobe, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I had been fighting a migraine all day, the kind that starts at the base of your skull and claws its way forward behind the eyes. I had almost skipped the event. My company, a logistics firm that had recently expanded into 3 new international markets, was in the middle of a critical software migration. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night for the past month, but I came. I showed up because I was the dutiful daughter. I was Amelia. I was the one who was always there. My father, Robert, tapped his spoon against his glass. The sharp ding-ding-ding cut through the murmur of conversation. The room fell silent. He stood up, smoothing his tie, his face flushed with wine and pride. My mother, Linda, sat beside him, beaming up at him with that adoring gaze she reserved strictly for the men in her life. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began, his voice booming without the microphone. 40 years, it's a long time to build a life, a long time to build a legacy. He paused for effect, looking around the room. His eyes scanned over me, barely registering my presence, before locking onto the man standing to my left, my younger brother, Luke. "When Linda and I look back at our greatest achievements," Robert continued, his voice thick with emotion, "we know that our hard work was worth it. We look at our son, Luke." He gestured for Luke to stand. My brother, wearing a suit that was slightly too tight and a smile that was slightly too wide, stood up and waved. He looked every bit the part of the golden boy. "Luke," my father announced, raising his glass higher. "A senior sales associate, a man making waves in the city. It brings a father such peace to know he has raised a winner. To know that, out of everything we've done, we produced at least one truly successful child who carries the family name with such prestige." The air left the room. I felt the silence physically. It wrapped around my throat, at least one truly successful child. I stood there, frozen. I was the CEO of a company that employed 400 people. I had just been featured in a regional business magazine, a copy of which I had mailed to them, and which I suspected was sitting unopened in their recycling bin. I had bought them their car. I had paid off the last chunk of their mortgage anonymously 2 years ago. But to Robert and Linda, I was just Amelia who did something with computers. Amelia, who was single at 32. Amelia, the runner-up. Luke didn't correct him. He didn't glance at me with an apology. He just basked in the applause, nodding as if he had invented the concept of success himself. My mother clapped the loudest, her eyes misty. I looked at them, my father, puffed up with arrogance, my mother, blind in her devotion, and Luke, soaking up the unearned glory. The migraine spiked, a blinding flash of pain that nearly buckled my knees. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw my glass. I didn't scream that my net worth was 10 times what Luke would make in a lifetime. I simply set my glass down on the white tablecloth. It made a soft thud that no one heard over the applause. I turned my back on the head table, walked through the cheering crowd, and pushed through the heavy double doors into the cool night air. As the heavy doors swung shut, muffling the sound of my family celebrating my brother's mediocrity, I realized something terrifying. The betrayal wasn't just that they didn't respect me. The betrayal was that they didn't even see me. And that realization hurt worse than the diagnosis of the stress-induced ulcers I'd received just a week prior. The valet looked concerned when he brought my car around. I must have looked like a wreck. Kay pale, shaking, possibly on the verge of fainting. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked as he held the door open. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice sounding brittle to my own ears. "Just a headache." I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the rhythmic thweep-thweep of the windshield wipers as a light rain began to fall. The drive gave me time to think, which was dangerous. Usually, when my parents cut me down, I would go home and cry. I would call a friend and vent. I would try to rationalize it. They're old-fashioned. They don't understand the tech industry. Luke needs the validation more than I do. But not tonight. Tonight, the tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard stone settled in my stomach. I parked in the driveway of my house, a modern, sprawling glass and stone structure that I loved and which my mother had visited exactly once. She had called it cold and asked why I needed so much space if I didn't have a husband to fill it. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Luke. "Luke, where'd you go? Mom's asking why you left before the cake. Kind of rude, aim." I stared at the screen. Kind of rude. I didn't reply. I deleted the thread. The next few weeks were a blur of work, which was my sanctuary. At the office, I wasn't the disappointing daughter. I was the boss. I was the architect of complex supply chains. I commanded respect not because of my gender or my birth order, but because I was good at what I did. I threw myself into the software migration. I worked 16-hour days. I stopped calling my parents on Sundays. They didn't notice. In fact, the only time I heard from them was 3 weeks later, when my mother called to tell me about Luke's new apartment. "It's just gorgeous, Amelia," she gushed over the phone while I signed payroll authorizations. "It has a view of the river. Of course, the rent is high, but with Luke's commissions, well, you know how well he's doing." "That's great, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "I have to go, I have a meeting." "Always working," she sighed. "You should ask Luke for some tips on work-life balance. He always makes time for us." I hung up. It was infuriating, but it was also clarifying. They were living in a fantasy world where Luke was the tycoon and I was the struggling spinster. Then, about 2 months after the anniversary party, the cracks started to show. I was at a charity luncheon for local business owners. It was the kind of event where everyone wears name tags and exchanges stiff handshakes. I was there to represent my company, Helix Logistics. I was standing near the buffet when I overheard 2 men talking. One of them was the regional director for the sales firm Luke worked for. I recognized him from Luke's social media posts. "Had to let him go," the director was saying, shaking his head. "Nice kid, plenty of charm, but he couldn't close a door, let alone a deal. And the expense reports, a nightmare. We're still auditing the last quarter." My ears perked up. I froze, hovering over a tray of mini quiches. "Who was it?" the other man asked. "Luke," the director said. "Luke last name. Shame, he talked a big game." I quietly moved away, my heart pounding. Luke had been fired for incompetence and questionable expenses. I waited for the family group chat to blow up. I waited for the panicked call from my mother. I waited for Luke to ask for a loan. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing. On social media, Luke was posting photos of business lunches, which I now realized were just solo lunches and captions about the grind. My parents were still commenting, "So proud," and "Keep it up." He hadn't told them. He was lying to them. He was pretending everything was fine, likely burning through his savings and credit cards to maintain the illusion of the successful child. I sat in my office chair, spinning slowly, looking out at the skyline. A slow, dark smile touched my lips for the first time in months. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was invisible. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I owned the game they were trying to play. I knew the truth. And in business, information is the deadliest weapon of all. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the history. I didn't just exist alongside Luke. I had spent my entire life propping him up. When we were in high school, I was the one who proofread his essays because he couldn't focus. When he got a DUI in college, I was the one who drove 2 hours in the middle of the night to pick him up from the station, paying the bail with the savings I had scraped together from my part-time job at the library. I never told our parents. I let them believe his lie that he had lost his wallet and needed cash. I had spent decades catching him before he hit the ground, purely because I loved him. I wanted him to succeed. I thought we were a team against the world, or at least against the high expectations of our parents. But the dynamic shifted 6 months ago when Vanessa entered the picture. Vanessa was Luke's fiancée. She was beautiful in a very curated, sharp-edged way, always perfectly manicured, perfectly highlighted, and perfectly condensing. She worked as an influencer consultant, which, as far as I could tell, meant she spent a lot of time taking photos of her brunch and telling other people how to look rich. She had identified the power dynamic in our family immediately. She saw that Robert and Linda worshipped Luke, and she leaned into it. She fed their ego. She called my father sir, with a breathless reverence, and complimented my mother's cooking as if it were Michelin star quality. And she treated me like the hired help. I remember the first time I met her. Luke brought her to a family barbecue. I was in the kitchen, helping my mother prep the salads because, as usual, the men were talking business outside. Vanessa breezed into the kitchen, holding an empty wine glass. "Oh, Amelia, be a dear and top this off," she asked, thrusting the glass toward me without making eye contact. She was busy looking at her reflection in the microwave door. I poured the wine. "So, Vanessa, Luke tells me you're in marketing." She laughed, a tinkling, condescending sound. "Oh no, sweetie, I build brands. It's a bit more complex than just marketing. It's about lifestyle curation." She took a sip and looked me up and down. "Luke says you do data entry or something. That must be relaxing, low stress." "I own a logistics firm," I corrected her gently. "We handle supply chain management for." Right, computers," she waved her hand dismissively. "That's good for you. It's important to have a little hobby to keep you busy until you settle down." My mother, who was chopping cucumbers nearby, chimed in. "Yes, Amelia works very hard at her office, though we keep telling her a career isn't everything. Vanessa, did you see the ring Luke picked out? He has such impeccable taste." Vanessa beamed, flashing the diamond that I knew Luke had put on a credit card with an obscene interest rate. "He really does. He's going to take such good care of me. It's so rare to find a man who is truly a provider these days." She shot me a look then. It was brief, but it was lethal. It was a look that said, "I know you're the loser here. I know I've won the prize, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." From that day on, Vanessa was the architect of my isolation. She whispered in Luke's ear. She encouraged him to skip my birthday dinner because they had reservations at that new exclusive spot. She was the one who nodded vigorously when my father made jokes about my spinsterhood. She was the one driving the golden child narrative because her entire lifestyle depended on Luke being the success story. If Luke failed, Vanessa's image failed. So when I found out Luke had lost his job, I knew who the real enemy was. It wasn't just my brother's incompetence, it was Vanessa's ambition. She wouldn't let him confess to our parents. She would force him to lie, to dig a deeper hole, just to keep the provider narrative alive. They were a dangerous pair, a desperate liar and a ruthless climber, and they were about to walk right into my world. It was 3 months after the anniversary party when my office phone rang. My executive assistant, Sarah, buzzed me. "Amelia, there's Mr. Luke here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he's your brother. He says it's an emergency." I swiveled my chair around, facing the door. I had been expecting this call, though I hadn't expected him to show up in person. The desperation must have been at a breaking point. "Send him in," I said, my voice calm. I straightened my blazer. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, not of my family, but of my team on the day we launched our flagship software. The door opened, Luke walked in. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and that golden boy shine was completely gone. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He looked like a man who was drowning. "Hey, sis," he said, trying to summon a smile that faltered immediately. "Nice office. Bigger than I thought." "Hello, Luke," I said, not standing up. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He sat down, fidgeting with his cufflinks. He looked around the room, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the hum of serious business happening just outside my door. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I need a favor," he whispered. "I'm listening," I said. I'm in between opportunities right now," he stammered, using the corporate speak Vanessa had probably coached him on. "Just a temporary transition, but cash flow is a little tight. Vanessa, she has expectations. The wed. Ding deposits are due, the rent." He took a breath and looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I need a job, Amelia, just for a bit, until I land the next big director role. I know you have this. Company, can you find a spot for me? Sales, management, anything." I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had let our father humiliate me. I thought of Vanessa, who called my life's work a hobby. "I do have an opening," I said slowly. "We had a sudden vacancy this morning. It's immediate start, full benefits." Luke slumped with relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, AIM. I knew I could count on you. VP of Sales, Regional Manager." "No," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of the CEO. "Those positions are filled by qualified professionals." I slid a folder across the desk. "The position is on the facilities maintenance team, specifically sanitation." Luke froze. "You want me to be a janitor?" "It pays $22 an hour," I said coldly. "Take it or leave it." Luke stared at the word sanitation on the contract as if it were written in an alien language. The color had drained from his face, leaving him a pale, sweaty shade of gray. "This is a joke, right?" he asked, his laugh sounding more like a choke. "You're pranking me. Is this some kind of hazing for the new VP?" I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I simply tapped the paper with my index finger. "No joke, Luke. This is the only vacancy I have. The hours are 6:00 p.m. to 2:00 a.m. It involves cleaning the main lobby, the break rooms, and yes, the executive washrooms on the top floor. It pays $22 an hour, which is generous for the industry standard, but I'm willing to bump it up because you're family." "I can't be a janitor, Amelia," he hissed, leaning forward, his voice cracking. "I'm a sales professional. I have a brand. What will Vanessa say? What will Mom and Dad say?" "That's entirely up to you," I replied calmly. "You can tell them the truth, that you lost your job and your sister is helping you get back on your feet, or you can tell them nothing. But I need an answer now. My head of facilities is ready to post this listing online in 10 minutes. Luke looked at the door, then back at the contract. He was doing the math in his head. The rent on the Riverside apartment, the lease on the BMW, the engagement ring payments. He was trapped, and we both knew it. "I'll take it," he whispered, defeat slumping his shoulders. "But you can't tell them. You have to promise me, Amelia. If Mom finds out I'm scrubbing toilets, it'll kill her." "I won't volunteer the information," I said, phrasing it carefully. "But Luke, you know how these things go. The truth has a way of surfacing." He signed the papers with a shaking hand. The transformation was immediate and jarring. The next evening, after the corporate staff had largely filtered out, I stayed late in my office. I watched the security feed on my secondary monitor. At 6:15 p.m., Luke walked into the basement utility room wearing a crisp suit. At 8:30 p.m., he emerged wearing the navy blue Helix Logistics coveralls. They were slightly too short in the legs, exposing his expensive loafers, a ridiculous contrast that summarized his entire existence. He was pushing a yellow mop bucket. I zoomed in on the camera feed. His expression was a mixture of misery and terror. Every time a late-working employee walked past him in the hallway, he ducked his head, pretending to inspect a smudge on the floor, terrified of being recognized. But he wasn't just working, he was scheming. A week into his employment, I decided to do a little digital digging. I pulled up LinkedIn. There it was, a fresh update on Luke's profile, posted just 2 days ago. Luke, last name, Director of Strategic Operations at Helix Logistics, excited to join the family business and lead the team into a new era of growth. The post had over 200 likes. My parents had commented, naturally. Robert, finally in the seat he deserves. Show them how it's done, son. Linda, my executive, so proud. Vanessa, power couple moves only. Nail light. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark office. He wasn't just lying by omission, he was actively fabricating a career using my company's name. He was stealing valor in the corporate world. I picked up my phone and called my legal department. Draft a standard confidentiality agreement and an ethics compliance form for the sanitation staff, I instructed. And specifically, I want a clause about misrepresentation of company titles on social media. Don't enforce it yet, just have it ready for my file. I wasn't going to fire him, not yet. Firing him would be too easy. I needed him to dig the hole so deep that when the walls finally collapsed, there would be no climbing out. 3 weeks later, the strain was becoming visible. Luke looked exhausted, working a physical job at night while pretending to work a high-stress corporate job. Ing the day, presumably to keep up appearances for Vanessa, was draining him. I encountered him in the flesh on a Tuesday night. I had stayed late to review the quarterly budget. I walked into the executive wing's hallway, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floors. Luke was there. He was polishing the brass handle of the boardroom door. He froze when he saw me. "Missed a spot," I said quietly, stopping beside him. He straightened up, clutching the microfiber cloth. "This isn't funny, Amelia. My back is killing me. The chemicals are making my hands peel. Look at this." He held up his hands, which were indeed red and raw. "I can't keep doing this." "Then quit," I shrugged. "But then, who pays for the BMW?" "I'm trying to find something else," he snapped, lowering his voice when he realized how loud he was. "But the market is tough. And Vanessa, she's ramped up the wedding planning. She booked the plaza. Do you have any idea what the deposit on the plaza is?" "I assume it's more than a janitor makes in a year," I said dryly. "She thinks I'm the director of operations," he blurted out, the confession tumbling out of him. "She thinks you brought me in to overhaul the sales division. She's telling everyone. She's telling her friends, her parents, our parents." He looked at me with panicked eyes. "You have to back me up, Aim, just for a little while. Just until I get back on my feet. If she finds out I'm the janitor, she'll leave me." I looked at my brother, a 30-year-old man terrified that his fiancée would leave him if he stopped being an ATM. "If she leaves you because you lost a job, Luke, she doesn't love you," I said, a rare moment of genuine sisterly advice breaking through my anger. "You don't understand," he sneered, his face twisting back into defensive arrogance. "People like us, successful people, we have standards. Vanessa has standards. You wouldn't get it because you're happy being alone." The sympathy evaporated instantly. The successful people comment. Even while wearing a janitor's jumpsuit, standing in the hallway of the building I built, he still believed he was above me. "Get back to work, Luke," I said, my voice ice cold. "The executive washroom on the north side is out of paper towels. Fix it." I walked away, leaving him fuming. The real test came 2 days later. My receptionist called me, her voice hushed. "Amelia, there's a woman here to see you. A Vanessa. She says she's here to have lunch with the director of operations, but we don't have anyone listed under that title. She's insisting she's in the right place. My heart rate spiked. This was it. Send her up to my office, I said, and tell security to hold Luke in the basement. Do not let him come up to the lobby. Vanessa swept into my office 5 minutes later. She looked immaculate in a white power suit that probably cost $3,000. She held a designer takeout bag. Amelia, she chirped, looking around my office with a critical eye. Cute space. A little industrial, but I guess that fits the brand. Hello, Vanessa, I said, not looking up from my laptop. To what do I owe the visit? I'm here to surprise Luke for lunch, she said, setting the bag on my conference table without asking. He's been so busy with the new promotion. He says he's basically running the place for you. It's so sweet of you to finally admit you needed his help. I told him, Luke, go in there and save that company. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She truly believed that I, the founder, needed her unemployed fiancé to save my multi-million-dollar corporation. Luke is unavailable, I said. He's currently deep in the trenches, dealing with some very messy situations in the sanitation department. Oh, delegating to the lower staff? She laughed. Good for him. He needs to learn to crack the whip. Well, just tell him I stopped by. And tell him my mother expects you both for dinner next Saturday, a little celebratory family gathering. She walked to the door, then turned back, her eyes narrowing. You know, Amelia, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's really big of you to step aside and let Luke take the lead. Not many sisters would be secure enough to let the brother be the star. It suits you, being in the background. She smiled, a shark showing its teeth, and left. I sat in the silence she left behind. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage. Step aside. Background, star. She had just handed me the detonator. Dinner next Saturday, I whispered to the empty room. Perfect. The week leading up to the celebratory dinner was a study in psychological warfare. My parents called me incessantly. We are just so relieved, my mother said on Tuesday. We were worried about Luke for a while there with his old job, but now, director of operations. Amelia, why didn't you tell us you were giving him such a huge responsibility? IW. Anteed it to be a surprise, I said, my voice neutral. Well, Robert is just over the moon, she continued. He's been telling the guys at the golf club that Luke is finally taking over the family legacy. He says it's good to have a man at the helm of the company. You know how he worries about you handling the stress. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. Taking over, a man at the helm. I know, Mom, I said. Dad has always had strong opinions. We're going to make a big toast at dinner, she promised. You make sure you're there on time, don't be late with work. This is Luke's night. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. Meanwhile, at the office, the investigation into Luke's performance was complete. I had the shift supervisor, a no-nonsense man named Gary, send me a full report. It was damning. Employee, Luke last name position, janitorial staff incidents. 1. Consistently late for shift, start 4 times in 2 weeks. 2. Caught sleeping in the break room, supply closet. 3. Refusal to clean the second-floor men's room due to unacceptable odors. 4. Rude behavior toward security staff. I printed the report. Then, I went to the HR server and printed his signed employment contract. The one clearly stating job title, custodian/sanitation engineer, and hourly rate, $22. I also printed a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile claiming to be director. I placed these 3 documents in a sleek, black leather folder. On Friday night, the night before the dinner, I went down to the loading dock where the janitorial staff clocked out. Luke was there, looking like a zombie. He had bleach stains on his cuffs. Big dinner tomorrow, I said, leaning against the wall. Luke jumped. Jesus, Amelia, don't sneak up on me. Are you ready? I asked. Yeah, he wiped sweat from his forehead. Look, about tomorrow, Dad is going to make a speech, Just, please, let him have this. Let me have this. I'm applying for other jobs. I have an interview next week. I'll be out of your hair soon. Just nod and smile, okay? You want me to lie to them, Luke? I want you to be a sister, he shouted, his voice echoing in the concrete bay. For once in your life, stop being the CEO and just be my sister. Protect me, that's what family does. Family respects each other, I countered. Family doesn't introduce their sister as a failure at her own party. Family doesn't let their fiancé belittle the person paying their bills. Vanessa is just spirited, he muttered. She's a bully, Luke, and you're a coward. He stepped toward me, his face red. You're jealous, that's what this is. You're jealous that even when I'm mopping floors, they love me more than you. You can buy the building, Amelia, but you can't buy their pride. I'm still the son. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. He had said the quiet part out loud. He knew it. He banked on it. He was weaponizing their favoritism against me, convinced that I was so desperate for their love that I would swallow any indignity just to keep the peace. He was wrong. You're right, Luke, I said softly. I can't buy their pride, but I can certainly clarify what they're proud of. I pushed off the wall and walked away. What does that mean? He called after me, a hint of panic returning to his voice. Amelia, what does that mean? I didn't look back. I went straight to my car, the black leather folder tucked safely in my bag. The drive home was strange. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was the calm of a soldier who has finished cleaning their rifle and is simply waiting for dawn. I arrived home and laid the outfit for tomorrow on my bed, a sharp crimson-red dress, armor. I reviewed the plan. The dinner, my parents' house. The guests, Mom, Dad, Luke, Vanessa, me, and Aunt Carol, the family gossip. The subject, Luke's meteoric rise to the top of Helix Logistics. I opened the folder one last time. I looked at the contract with Luke's signature. They wanted a successful child. I would show them exactly what success looked like. Success wasn't a title you lied about on the internet. Success was the power to hire, to fire, and to expose the truth. I closed the folder. The trap was set. All they had to do was walk into it. And knowing my family, they would run into it head first, champagne glasses in hand. My parents' house smelled of roast beef and expensive perfume, the scent of a celebration that hadn't been earned. I walked in 5 minutes late, deliberately. The crimson dress fit like a second skin, a stark contrast to the beige and pastel tones my mother favored for her home decor. There she is, my father, Robert, boomed from the dining room. He was already holding a glass of scotch. The silent partner, come in, Amelia, come sit. We're just hearing about Luke's new corner office. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates usually reserved for Christmas or visits from the bishop. At the head of the table sat my father. To his right, Luke. Next to Luke, Vanessa, looking predatory and pleased. Aunt Carol sat across from them, her eyes darting around, eager for news to spread to the rest of the extended family. Hi, everyone, I said, taking my seat at the far end, opposite my father. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. You look bold, Vanessa said, eyeing my red dress. Very aggressive color for a family dinner, but I guess you need to stand out somehow. I felt festive, I smiled, snapping my napkin onto my lap. It's a big night, isn't it? Huge, my mother, Linda, brought in a platter of roasted vegetables. We are just so proud. Luke was telling us about the new merger he's handling. Amelia, you must be so relieved to have him taking that weight off your shoulders. I looked at Luke. He was staring intently at his water glass, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple despite the air conditioning. Oh, absolutely, I said, my voice smooth as silk. Luke has been indispensable. The things he's handling, no one else wanted to touch them. That's leadership, my father nodded sagely. Taking the jobs no one else wants. That's what I always told you, Luke. A leader gets his hands dirty. I almost laughed out loud. He certainly does, Dad. He gets his hands very dirty. Luke shot me a panicked glare, his eyes begging me to stop. But Vanessa didn't notice the tension. She was too busy preening. "Well," Vanessa interjected, placing a hand on Luke's arm, "we've actually been looking at houses. The bonus structure for the director role is just incredible. We're thinking of the gated community in Oakwood." "Oakwood," Aunt Carol gasped. "That's exclusive." "Only the best for the man running Helix Logistics," Vanessa smirked. Dinner proceeded in an agony of fabrication. Luke spun tale after tale, clearly rehearsed. He talked about firing the dead weight, ironic, about optimizing flow, he meant mopping patterns, and managing liquid assets, cleaning toilets. My parents ate it up, nodding and smiling, casting pitying glances at me, the sister who had built the company but was now, in their minds, just a spectator to her brother's greatness. Finally, the moment arrived. My father stood up, tapping his glass. "A toast," he announced. We all raised our glasses. "To my son, Luke," Robert began, his voice trembling with pride. "For years, we knew this day would come. He has stepped up to the plate. He is the director of operations, the future of the company, and the only one in this family with the killer instinct to truly succeed. To Luke, our success story." "To Luke," my mother and Aunt Carol chimed in. Vanessa kissed him on the cheek. "To my power husband." They drank, I didn't. I held my glass, watching them savor the lie. The room went quiet as they set their glasses down. My father looked at me, expecting me to join the praise. "Amelia," he prompted, "nothing to add." I set my glass down. The sound was sharp against the wood. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silence, "I do have a question, since we're discussing Luke's daily responsibilities at the office." I turned my head and locked eyes with my brother. He stopped breathing. I smiled, a sweet, venomous curve of the lips. How is he enjoying cleaning the executive bathrooms? The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. My mother blinked. "What?" "The executive bathrooms," I repeated, enunciating every syllable. "On the top floor, the ones with the marble counters. I noticed the north stall was out of paper towels on Tuesday. Did you get around to restocking that, Luke? Or were you too busy restructuring the sales team?" Vanessa let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "What is she talking about? Amelia, you've had too much wine. That's not funny." "I haven't had a drop," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the black leather folder. I slid it across the long table. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop right in front of my father. "Open it," I commanded. "Amelia, this is enough," my father growled, his face turning purple. "Stop trying to humiliate your brother just because you're jealous." "Open it." My father's hand shook as he opened the folder. The first thing he saw was the photo I had printed from the security feed. Luke, in the blue janitor's jumpsuit, pushing a yellow mop bucket past the reception desk at 11:00 p.m. My father stared at the image. He couldn't process it. "What is this?" he whispered. "Keep reading," I said. "The next page is his employment contract, signed by him 3 weeks ago." My father flipped the page. He read aloud, his voice barely audible. "Position, sanitation engineer, facilities team, hourly rate, $22. "That's a lie," Luke suddenly shouted, jumping up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. "She forged it. She's trying to sabotage me." "Sit down, Luke," I said, not raising my voice. "Or I'll play the audio recording of you begging me for the job because you were broke and terrified Vanessa would leave you." Vanessa slowly turned her head toward Luke. The adoration was gone, replaced by a look of dawning horror and absolute disgust. "You're a janitor," she whispered. "It's a temporary thing," Luke stammered, reaching for her hand. She recoiled as if he were contagious. Baby, listen, I'm consulting. I'm analyzing the company from the ground up. It's an undercover boss thing." "He cleans the toilets, Vanessa," I cut in, ruthless. "From 6:00 p.m. to 2:00 a.m. He was fired from his sales job 4 months ago for incompetence and expense fraud. He has zero savings. The deposit for the plaza? He can't afford a deposit on a pizza. Vanessa stood up. She looked at the contract on the table, then at the photo of Luke in the jumpsuit. Her face hardened into a mask of pure fury. "You told me you were a director," she hissed. "You told me you were buying the house in Oakwood. You let me tell my mother we were merging our families." "We can still," Luke started. "You are a liar," she spat, "and you are broke." She grabbed her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't say goodbye to my parents. She simply walked out of the dining room. We heard the front door slam a moment later. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Luke stood there, swaying slightly. My mother was weeping into her napkin. Aunt Carol was staring at the photo of the mop bucket with her mouth hanging open. My father looked up from the folder. He looked old. All the bluster, all the arrogance had drained out of him. He looked at his golden child, then he looked at me. "Why?" he asked me, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this? Why would you shame him like this in front of family?" "I didn't shame him, Dad." I stood up, smoothing my dress. "You did. You stood there and told the world he was the success story while ignoring the person who actually owns the company. You wanted a successful son so badly you believed a lie rather than acknowledge the truth of your daughter." I picked up my purse. "Luke, you're fired," I added casually. "For misrepresentation of company credentials. Security will mail you your personal effects from your locker. Don't come to the building." I turned and walked out. Behind me, the only sound was my mother's sobbing and Luke trying to explain. "But Dad, I was going to tell you." I didn't look back. The fallout was swift and total. By the time I got home that night, my phone was blown up with texts from Luke, nasty, desperate, vitriolic messages blaming me for ruining his life. I blocked his number without reading past the first two. The next morning, Sunday, I sat on my patio with a cup of coffee, listening to the birds. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the crushing weight of needing to prove myself. The illusion was broken. My father came to see me 3 days later. He didn't call first, he just showed up at my office. My assistant tried to stop him, but I buzzed him in. He stood in the middle of my office, my real office, with the panoramic view of the city, and looked around as if seeing it for the first time. He looked at the awards on the shelf. He looked at the busy floor of employees outside the glass walls. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "You didn't ask," I replied, not looking up from my monitor. "He lied to us, Amelia, for months." "And you made it easy for him," I said, finally turning to face him. "You made it so clear that you only valued status and appearances that he felt he had to lie to exist in your world. And you made it so clear that I was invisible that I had to burn the house down just to be seen." He flinched. "We never meant to make you feel invisible. We worried about you. You work so hard, you're alone." "I'm not alone, Dad," I gestured to the company around me. "I built a community. I built a legacy. You just didn't recognize it because it didn't look like the one you wanted." He stood there for a long time, twisting his hat in his hands. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to say it was okay, that we could go back to normal. "I'm sorry," he said finally. It was stiff, difficult for him. "Thank you," I said, "but apologies don't change the past, and they don't change the fact that Luke needs to grow up. If you bail him out this time, if you give him money or let him move back in, you are destroying him. Let him fail. It's the only way he'll ever actually succeed." I don't know if he listened, but I do know that Luke moved into a small studio apartment across town. Vanessa never spoke to him again. Rumor has it she was engaged to a hedge fund manager within 3 months. Luke eventually got a job at a car rental agency. An entry-level job. No fancy titles, no executive washrooms. Last I heard, he was actually showing up on time. As for me, I stopped attending the Sunday dinners. I stopped seeking their approval. I started spending my weekends hiking, traveling, and mentoring young women in business. The relationship with my parents is polite, distant. We talk about the weather, we talk about sports, but we don't talk about success. We don't need to. The silence at that dinner table said everything that ever needed to be said. I realized that night that I had spent 30 years trying to win a game that was rigged against me. The only way to win was to flip the board, walk away, and build your own table. And I have to admit, the view from the head of my own table is pretty spectacular.